Hi everyone, hope you're getting on okay. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. It's no doubt been a super busy week, possibly busier than normal, and hope you're not zoomed out, shall we say, yet. So we've been finding, and I don't know if yourselves, if you've been on other video sessions this week, that it's probably a bit of extra pressure on the internet and broadband connections. So if people would be kind enough to turn off their, I've got you on mute. If you've got your video on, if you could turn your video off, that'd be really great, please. And yeah, as people are joining, if you could, just drop them, if you can know where the chat is, just drop your, say hi, who you are and your organisation, that'd be fantastic. And if you do it by messaging to everyone, then we'll all know who's here. That'll be ideal. If anybody's having any problems, do drop us a message as well, and we will resolve as we can. So we do hope for people who've, been on the webinar on Wednesday and on the webinar this morning that the sound, there was a better quality sound today. We know that there's still little issues about the sound, but I think generally it is the capability of the internet and the broadband. So if you can just bear with us. Excellent. So this afternoon's webinar, it's all about your business strategy and turning that into your funding plan and preparing for success. I'm delighted that we've got Sue Robinson and Pam Shaw here again with us.
Hello, everybody.
Hello from sort of very grey Europe.
Okay, that's great. And so thanks, Sue and Pam. I'll pass over to you in a sec. Just to say, we'll be taking questions. You can put a question into the chat at any time. We'll be having a bit of a Q&A partway through the webinar, and then further Q&A at the end. Obviously, this with the focus, around getting your funding plan and then being prepared for success. I do think these critical aspects can really power your organisation forward, and anybody who's involved in fundraising in your organisation, be they a dedicated fundraiser or fundraising as part of your job or within your trustee board. So over to Sue and Pam.
Thank you, Malcolm. It's Pam here. What we're going to talk about today is three things. We're going to first think about what should be considered when you're making a fundraising plan and what that encompasses. We're going to also talk about tools to help you decide what is important to your organization. And that's obviously about things like what fundraising tools that you can use to help you get ahead. And then the last little bit is we're going to talk about you've been successful with your application, and it's really what we're talking about, report writing and what makes a good report and makes funders want to fund you again. Right, so this is a declaration. For those of you who have been on the webinar before, you'll see all the material that's provided is research that we've done, which is credited or regarded as best practice, and this was just recently reviewed at the beginning of March. However, this is not a substitute for professional, legal or financial advice, so if you've got any questions, you should speak to the professional bodies about that. So, 5-minute fundraiser. We were going to try to show you a clip, as Malcolm mentioned. We're a little bit concerned about the running of videos actually on this format. So what I would really encourage you to do, if you have not already seen it, is have a look at the 5-minute fundraiser. The list is there on, the link is there And I think you'll get these slides at the end, so you'll have that. But a 5-minute fundraiser is a range of short video clips from the Institute of Fundraising, and they encompass all sorts of different things, like developing a fundraising strategy, SWOT analysis, introduction to trust fundraising, which is a really good one, especially if, you know, we talked about on the seminar previously, getting your board on board. So that would be a good one to show your board members about trust fundraising as well. And then a case for support, so important, that we've mentioned it in every single of our 3 webinars. And making sure why that's important. And then there's also things like the introduction to major donor fundraising. The one that we were going to show you, which was the fundraising strategy, talked about things like what does the strategy include, how you'll raise funds, talking about vision and mission and SMART objectives. So definitely worth a view if you've got spare time, and they're very entertaining as well. So yeah, so right, let's get moved on. Sustainability, again, apologies, you've seen this one before if you've come to any of our webinars, but again, sustainability is so important. We've mentioned this guide before in our other webinars, but it's great. I think over 6,000 voluntary organizations, social enterprises, funders, all sorts have used this. A gentleman called Graham Reiki researched sustainability, and he found that income generation is only one of the 5 pillars that are really important in sustainability. Organizations need to look at other contributors and principles about sustainability, and that includes things like relationships, understanding the need to work, and what your work does, how effective you are at that work, and how you can communicate that message to others. You as fundraisers, or those responsible for fundraising, are not only responsible for sustainability. That needs to be shared throughout your organization. So this guide is free to download. There's further explanation of all the contributors there. So I would suggest that you have a look at that. Right, let's get talking about turning your business strategy into a plan. Any good plan, as you'd expect, should cover the basics of where you are at the moment, where you're going to try to be, and where you'd like to be in the future. It's surprising how many organizations that I've spoken to that don't have or struggle with being able to identify those 3 points. A fundraising plan needs to be a living document that lays out specific fundraising tasks and strategies, including things like who is responsible for completing them and the time frame that they should be accomplished. This helps you be proactive rather than reactive in your fundraising. And I guess to some point, we all have to be a little bit reactive. I'm sure you're experiencing that right now. A fundraising strategy doesn't need to be long or complicated, but it should be a planning tool that gives you the information that you need to strategically plan your fundraising activities in line with your organizational outcomes. An organization's fundraising strategy is an integral part of what's happening within your organization. And it's really key that you're making sure that you're looking at all different wider business strategic plans when you start planning. The things you need to do is think about things. What are the values of your organization? What are the moral principles? If your organization that's working on an alcohol dependency issue, you might not take funding, for example, to a funder who generates its income from whiskey distilleries. Equally, what rules and regulations do you operate within? You also need to think about things like your business mission, a clear summary of what your organization is seeking to do, and specific organizational objectives for the period of funding plan. And we're going to talk about a few things over the next hour or so, things like fundraising audits, SWOTs analysis, and clear objectives and incomes. It's really important as well that you've got a tactical plan about how you're going to do what you're going to do, and you need to consider things like responsibilities, and who in monitoring, and who is going to be looking after things like the budget. An effective funding plan is made up of many factors, and we're going to talk about them now. And the first one we're going to talk about is considering the external environment. So when you're planning, it's useful to look at the external environment. And sadly, I think we've all been looking at quite avidly at what's happening within the world around us. Some of you might know this as a STEP or a PEST method, and it looks at the cultural and socio-economical, lots of different factors. This could be asking about what you're doing in terms of fundraising and the implications that, for example, technology play a part. As we live in a world of social media, thank goodness, because otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you right now. And this is an area which is key in fundraising in this day and age. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Sue, and she's going to talk to you about PESTLE, which probably most of you know about, but is worth reviewing. So over to you, Sue.
Okay, so this is the external factors that we, for the most part, can't actually influence. They will have an impact on our fundraising, our ability to raise money. We have to take these factors into account when putting together any fundraising plan. Now, you know, if we'd written this session, in fact, even when we were first designing this session at the beginning of March, Brexit was a huge issue. It is still now a big issue, but in political terms, we had an election, we had the budget had to be suspended, we had Brexit bubbling. So in terms of the political environment that we're all functioning within, it was very tricky then. Now all of a sudden we've got a virus. And who had that already listed in their risk register? You know, who had a global pandemic as one of their potential risks in a risk register? Funnily enough, certainly some of the funders are saying they didn't see that in anybody's risk register going forward. But the political environment we're working in is going to have a huge impact on what we're doing. People are, and organisations and businesses are still going to be worried about Brexit, never mind the more recent impact that the coronavirus is having and may continue to have on sort of the whole environment. Things like the economic situation. So we've got the stock market plummeting and then rallying and then plummeting again. So for us, when we're looking at grant making trusts and foundations, those that have endowments which are securely invested may have suddenly lost a third of that endowment overnight as the stock market comes and goes. Therefore, for us as fundraisers, assuming that those funders will still have the same amount of money to give away is perhaps a little bit naive. For organisations looking seriously at community fundraising or events and activities, that whole area will have to be rethought through now. The economic impact could be devastating, or this could be a real opportunity. I was looking yesterday that Just Giving had launched a pay it forward appeal, so people could actually promise to pay in the future to do things. So people might not have much money right now, they're making a commitment in the future when they have money available, will continue to support the causes they love. So there are huge opportunities in this environment as well. Again, let's look at what's happening in society. We've got generations who perhaps have moved apart and now forcibly coming together. It'll be interesting to see the impact that social isolation is going to have on families and whether people then choose to live a bit more closely, or there's looming working divorce cases. I'm not quite sure. But we had a society that was changing. We had older people, our traditional volunteer group, and people who joined boards and committees were increasingly having to work. We have to be flexible. So we have lots of organisations, lots of individuals now who don't want to join a committee, who don't want to have to go to meetings, but they are really, really important and could be very valuable to our cause. What some of us aren't doing well enough is creating opportunities for those people to continue to help us. The society is changing. We need to change our practices as we go forward and take this into account when we're planning our fundraising. Technology, who'd have thought even a couple of years ago that the country would be able to function with the whole country on lockdown. Technology has changed in terms of communicating. It gives us huge access to huge information and opportunity. We've now got things like Facebook and LinkedIn where you can actually find, who are the trustees of a particular grant maker, because they may well list it on their LinkedIn page, the opportunities that technology offer us in terms of finding the right sorts of funders, right sorts of potential funders, just enormous. I'm old enough to remember the very first director of grant-making trusts in Scotland, which I helped put together. And that had been because a piece of legislation had been introduced for the first time, made trusts produce an annual report and made that publicly available. And so many of the trusts and foundations actively said, we will not welcome any kind of approaches, we will not give any information available, we're not really going to tell you what we fund. Technology has meant that the organisations can't behave like that any longer. Information about grant-making trusts and foundations who are registered charities it's available on either Oscar's website or the Charity Commission website. Stuff all over the media now. Technology has changed our lives. It's made us as trust fundraisers just much more informed, much better informed, and it's made grant makers, I think, much more accountable. You know, their only purpose is to give. So trusts and foundations are set up as charities. The sole purpose for most of them is to give grants. That's their job. We're the ones that, as fundraisers, we're helping them to achieve their charitable objectives. The legal structure, let's not even go there. We had potential Scottish independence thing that's off the agenda for the year. What impact might that have on some of the large UK-wide London-based grant-making trusts and foundations? Would they withdraw from funding Scotland? Would that change? Not sure. And then we've got other things happening around in terms of in Scotland. We had consultation last year about changes to the Charities and Benevolent Charities and Trustee Investment Scotland Act that set up, Oscar set up the whole charity register. And what the regulators had asked for at that point was that all trustees should be listed and that information about trustees should be made publicly available in Scotland as it is in England and Wales. So I think for trust fundraisers that would be an exciting piece of information. But again, that piece of legislation has been put on the back burner and it's likely, well, it was going to be 2021, the new Charities Act was going to come in, but I think that's probably going to be delayed. But these legal issues can change our opportunities in terms of trust fundraising. Finally, the environmental issue, the whole world is going carbon neutral. How are you making sure that you're demonstrating that in your fundraising? And how are you taking that into account when you're planning your activities and services? Because funders increasingly want to see you're moving towards achieving government objectives and saving the planet. You know, it used to be that just using recycled paper was enough. It's way not enough now. Think about your environmental impact and what you're doing to minimise it, and then flaunt that, tell the funders that that's what you're doing. Putting that all together, gathering that information, and then looking sort of deeper. So what else can you learn about, well, the resources that you have within your organisation? Also, what are your competitors doing? What are other charities that are in a similar field to you doing? Not about, you know, I want to beat them because they're dreadful, but what can you learn about what they're doing really well? And can you, for example, copy those events, or are there funders that are funding their work? Why wouldn't they then fund yours? You know, what can you learn from competitors, from other charities doing similar things, or other charities that are at the peak? So look around, who are the organisations that are just absolutely fantastic at securing money from grant-making trusts and foundations, and what can you learn about what they do? What relationship have they built? How have they developed that relationship with those funders? Then, who else could you collaborate with? We talk a lot now about collaboration in terms of service delivery. Could you be collaborating in application to a trust for a particular activity that you're doing? Have a look at what you could do, what you could learn from other people. Then really have a clear understanding about the resources that you have within your organisation. You know, what have you got? Have you got volunteers or researcher that can help you do the research into potential funders? Have you got a volunteer that just loves that forensic research into who's got money at the moment? Are they changing their criteria? Are they likely to launch a new strategy? You know, what gossip is around about what they might be going to do? It's well worth spending time doing that research and learning what's happening in that external environment, the collaborators and competitors, the internal environment. Also think about the wider market. So what are the trends in giving by grant making trusts and foundations? We've got some really exciting stuff happening at the moment where traditionally, you know, I remember the days when grant making trusts and foundations just loved funding capital stuff because they wanted to be able to think, right, I'm going to give this organisation that amount of money, they're going to buy this or develop a room or whatever. Thankfully for us, funders have got much more flexible. They understand the need for funding projects and activities, but they're also understanding the value of just, you know, continuing to fund the core costs of our organisation, the money that it takes just to keep the wheels turning. Then we've got things like not wishing to over complement for a foundation, but the exciting opportunity within the Henry Duncan grant that they've just announced, where they're looking at making funding more unrestricted, saying, you know, you're an organisation, you know what you're doing, we're going to trust you, do the job well, and we're going to invest in you, we're going to be your partners. That whole thing around unrestricted income, multi-year funding, which for us as organisations seeking money is really, really, really reassuring, and let's hope some other funders follow suit. We've got the stakeholders. Now, it's all very well us sitting in our ivory tower putting this plan together, but we need to engage with other stakeholders. This is a chance to engage your trustees. What do they think? What do they think going forward? Who else could they recommend? What could they suggest? What strategies are going to be the right way going forward? You know, you're gathering all this information. What can you do to better work with funders to pull it all together, bring the businesses? You've got your business priorities. Now you're turning your fundraising plan, link that. In fact, this is where it can sometimes get really tricky. I have worked with organisations where they have no business plan, but have expected me to produce a fundraising plan. It's really tricky when you're having to sort of invent a fundraising plan when you've got not a clear business objective. So make sure the organisation you're with has got clear objectives, and then how your plan fits into sorting that. Then, once you've done all of that, you've gathered all of that information together, you put it all into a SWOT analysis. You don't do what many organisations do, where you start with a blank sheet of paper and split it into 4 corners and then try and do a SWOT analysis. If you haven't done external review, that thinking about the bigger picture, what's happening in the market, what's working for our competitors, who can we collaborate with, you need to do that thinking before you start putting all that information onto a SWOT analysis. This isn't where you start with a blank sheet of paper. So, you know, your strengths, what are you good at doing? What are you the market leaders yourselves in doing? Weaknesses, you know, what are the things that you could improve? This isn't about just listing the weaknesses, but how can you turn them into strengths? What are the opportunities? We're seeing some really exciting work in the middle of a huge crisis, but where organisations have turned themselves around and really looked at what they can do to support their communities, support their beneficiaries, and to genuinely make a difference. And they're being flexible enough and recognise that they need to change and develop opportunities or taken money from reserves to build on that. Then what are the threats? What's out there that might have an impact on us? And it's usually quite a long list. Don't get over pessimistic about it all, but just be realistic about the genuine threats there are to the organisation. Put that all together into your SWOT analysis and make sure you refer to it. The thing with all of these document all this information is you have to keep it alive, you have to keep it relevant, and being realistic, let's face it, a SWOT analysis done a month ago would look very, very different to a SWOT analysis being carried out in the present situation. So Malcolm, over to you. Are there any questions coming in at the moment?
Well, I'm quite quiet on the question front at the moment, you know. Can you hear me okay?
Right, let's crack on then.
So
Pam,
yeah,
are you ready
unless
to
there's
go?
anything burning from people, then like Sue says, I think we'll just crack on and let's see if there's more questions as we go forward.
Yeah, excellent. And I mean, certainly, Sue, that I'm sure lots of organisations, the SWOT analysis, that, as you said, that they made last week is completely different from the one they're going to make next week. So it's about, you know, that, as I said at the beginning here, the fundraising plan isn't a document that you look at, dust off once a year, and you need to make sure you're reviewing it all the time. And one of the things that you need to make sure that your organisation understands going forward is what your mission is and your vision. And I see, Paul, you've joined us today. I know last time we delivered this in November, you were here, and I used an example of the NSPCC mission statement, which is just such a clear vision and mission statement that I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to use it again. So the organisational mission should be something that's all embracing. It's a statement of what you would like to achieve as an organisation. And it focuses just on the current time. It should define what your organisation is, why does it exist, and what is your overall goal. And as I said, NSPCC have a clear mission statement, very simple, to end cruelty to children. And then their vision should be something that is idealistic, about how you see the world. It's something that focuses on the future. It's that blue sky thinking. And their vision and SPCC's is about, they are aiming for a society where all children are loved, valued, and able to fulfill their full potential. So you can see there, you've got a clear and easy statement that everyone understands. Next, if you look at the next slide, we're going to talk about your aims, objectives, and actions. Objectives can sometimes be a little bit confusing to people, but your aims are your, so Sue, can you just go back one? Sorry.
Right, sorry. It's probably fair to say that I'm sitting in Guruk in control of the PowerPoint, whereas Pam's in Largs with no access to the PowerPoint. So I'm in charge. And sometimes it goes very wrong, sorry.
That's not very wrong at all. So your aims are high-level statements. When we're talking about aims, these are things that we'll achieve in 3 to 5 years. And your objectives are your key milestones within your aims and objectives and your actions. And these are things that you're going to achieve. I guess the best starting point is to have an end point in mind. What is your overall fundraising goal for the year, or better yet, for the next 5 years? How much money do you want your group to raise in order to carry out the activities you want to carry out? So if we look at the next slide, brilliant, setting aims and objectives. What we've come up with is just a couple of examples of some aims and objectives. One for trust and one for individual donors. And again, this is going to change and it's going to be something that's going to need to be reviewed. So if you see in example 1, we've got the trust there. The aim of it is in the financial year, next financial year, we aim to raise £100,000 from trusts by, and then you've got your objectives. So let's say we're going to get one lead grant of £30,000. We're going to get maybe some 3 smaller grants of £10,000, and then we're going to secure 2 grants from trusts who have not funded us before. And so it's really about looking at the trusts and where you can get that funding from. If we're looking at another example, say for individual donors, and I will just add a little caveat to say, remember, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So when you're doing your strategy into a plan, don't just base it all on trust fundraising or events fundraising. So we're looking at individual donors here as well. So let's talk about an aim for an individual donor. That would be in the next financial year. We aim to raise £50,000 from individual donors. And we can do this by doing 3 direct mail appeals to our donor database, each with a target of 10,000. So we've got one in April, one in August, and one in December. And so as long as you've got a strong donor database that you can send out to, then this would be a really good objective for you. Another objective might be identifying and recruiting at least 2 major donors and securing £10,000 of gifts from each of them. So those are some big goals and big objectives for you, but they give you an idea of what you can do and start planning your own aims and objectives. And if we go and talk about tactics in the next slide, what we're going to do is, as a fundraiser, you need to have a good understanding of your organization's current income, and you need to make judgments of what types of income will suit the activities that you want to deliver. There's a number of different elements to this. So one of the things that you'll need to do is audit existing fundraising. So that's looking at what you're currently doing. How do you currently raise funds? What are your current fundraising sources? What else have you tried? I mean, oftentimes, remember, we learn through failure best. So what are things that you've done that didn't work so good? Why didn't it work so good? And what is your success rate? Then you need to think about accessing possible opportunities and making sure that you understand and clarify your constraints. So what about your organization could you be used to bring in more funding? So is your cause attractive? Do you have creative staff whose skills you can utilize? And remember, you've got an amazing resource within your own organization who are out there doing things every day. They're on the ground. So they are great, often untapped way of getting fundraising ideas. How appropriate is certain funding? Can you work in one geographical area compared to another one? Is it more effective? And then it's also about talking about things like understanding risks and benefits. So there's different risks and benefits tied to different fundraising. So take a look at the income generation spectrum, so what their different things there are, and think about the benefits and the risks of each type. Obviously, not everything will work for your organization, and much will rely on the type and the personality of your organization, your resources, and of course your capacity. And I think we're all finding out now about capacity and resources over this difficult time. So I've got a question for you. If you could possibly get your fingers working at the minute and tell us, what methods does your organization use to raise money currently? So I know there's some of you on the list that are concentrating on one area, but could you just give us some ideas of where you're getting your money from? And hopefully you'll be busy tapping away. Thanks, Darren. Nice to speak to you. Trust and Foundations is, yeah, that's where he's getting some of his money from. Thanks, Darren. Hi, Darren. Corporates, yeah, absolutely. Corporates, Trust and Foundations from Melanie. Thanks, Melanie. And Rachel saying corporates. Legal aid, training, and Trust and Foundations. Thanks, Julia. Interesting. Yeah, the training. Training's an interesting one. And Sue and I were just talking about this before we came on air, before we came on to the webinar, about this new social enterprise. So that's another one. Oh gosh, they're coming in right. Philip, thank you. Trust and small scale individual donors and contracts for delivery. So these are incredibly diverse ways of getting funding through Scottish Government, yes. Half government, thanks. Lots of begging. Yes, that's a good one as well. I mean, you've got to go do what you got to do. European funds. Oh my goodness, Rachel. Well, this is going to be interesting times for you as well. And trust and membership. Excellent. Thanks, Joe, for that membership. We hadn't had that one in talking about membership yet. And let's see, we get money from lotteries and Southeast Integration Network. So amazing. Thank you so much for your contributions. So we talked about things like individual giving and major donors. Nobody mentioned about events, unless I missed. Oh yes, sorry, Joe, you did mention about events. That's great. Online giving, and that's one that lots of people are doing now. I know that there's lots of organisations talking about online giving. What about PB, participate in budgeting? Has anybody had that joy of doing that yet? This is a new one. Legacies as well. I mean, you know, legacy is a slow burner, but another way to get involved. Capital campaigns, income from services. Oh, PB. Sue, you're a good person to talk about PB. Can you tell us all about the wonderful world of PB?
Me, Sue, or is there another Sue?
No, you, Sue.
Me, Sue. Oh, participatory budgeting, the world of participatory budgeting, where the community decides how money being invested in that community should be spent. What we've found, well, Oslo and Scottish Government have committed 1% of public spend must be decided through a participatory budgeting approach by the end of financial year 2021. Certainly Scottish Government wanted to move towards that becoming nearer 5% of public spend. What we've seen are lots of local authorities testing participatory budgeting by giving grants to small organisations and getting groups to pitch to make funding. But the whole thing around participatory budgeting is that contracts and tenders should be decided by communities. So, for example, a community should be deciding whether they want the streetlights to stay on longer, or the downside of that, it means that the bins will only get empty once a fortnight. So that communities are in charge of making decisions about what will impact on them. The concept started in Brazil. The city of Paris has been using it over the last few years, and they've actually saved 10% of the Paris budget, because the community, the people of Paris have decided what those that to them are important issues, rather than those decisions being taken by elected or unelected officials, usually in darkened rooms and not being opened and transparent. So the way local authorities have been running it for grants is that organisations have to go and pitch, and this is where your 1 minute elevator pitch, you know, what you would say in a lift if you were stuck in a lift with Bill Gates, it can be very important. And that whole public having to pitch for why your organisation should receive a proportion of the money available. So watch out for it, it's coming. If you haven't participated yet, you will be participating, and it's likely to grow. And it is hugely competitive. This is where perhaps organisations that have a good, solid case for support really have an understanding of the difference that they make for their beneficiaries. Those are the organisations that will star.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Sue. I see Melanie's got some participatory funding as well. So I think the challenge with it at the minute is in organisations who are geographically located in several different areas. You know, if you operate from the borders up to the Highlands, it's difficult for you to be able to get into those different areas and have that support across the board, because you're having to go to 6, 8, 10, 12 different PB sessions and get people there to support you. Yeah, that's a new sort of funding stream. I guess really it's thinking about what types of income that are suitable for different activities, and look what your objectives are for the next 1 to 3 years. What would be suitable for grant funding, what might link in with local priorities, and what might attract corporate support. And your organisation needs to also think about risk. I mean, this is something Sue and I talk quite a lot about, the risk in when you're making a plan. So it's all about finding out which method you want to use and which suits you, and keeping an eye on that. So I think, Sue, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, because this is where you can look at diversifying your methods. And it might be that you try different methods, or it might be that within your trust fundraising, you try different audiences. So that nice, solid, secure, this is an Ansoff matrix. There's a really good website called businessballs.com, which has got loads of information about any kind of business tool you could ever imagine. Ansoff matrix is looking at the different ways that you evaluate the impact you have on the market and the range of products or activities that you have available to sell. This is about business. So that top left-hand column, top left-hand box, where you've got really significant, so you're doing really, really well in terms of your market, a really good range of products. So those are your grant-making trusts regularly, year after year, will give you some money. You don't, to be honest, you probably don't need to do a huge amount about it, because they love you and they will continue to give money to you. But what you could do as you move into the right hand or the bottom boxes is look at, could you take those same activities that you're asking those funders to support for a whole range of new trusts? Or you take that appeal that you were using for grant making trusts, you take that to your corporate activities or corporate donors, or would that work with major donors? So are there products, if you like, that you're using that you could develop and use for different audiences? And this is where, if you get your fundraising in silos, where you have different teams, where the corporate fundraising team tries to grab any money that comes from the Vodafone Foundation, because of course Vodafone is a company and therefore it's corporate income, whereas the trust fundraiser who's done the application is saying, no, they're a foundation, it comes from a foundation. So competing within fundraising teams can be tricky, but if you're the person that's doing all of the fundraising, this is where you can be really creative and look at the different products that you're using for different markets. Or you could go wild and go rogue and go into that bottom right hand box, diversification, where you're trying something completely new, a completely new product, service, activity with a completely new audience. Very, very high risk, but it can be quite high return. And what you could do is turn those new products and new audiences into something that then becomes your solid top left hand column, that becomes your regular giving from regular donors. So what you want to do in putting your plan together is, yes, take into account your absolute solid, where you've got the market penetration, you know you've got the market, you know you've got the right product. A little bit of the, you know, product development or market development, and then think about diversification. Now, in business, most businesses, when they're putting their plan together, will have a research and development pot, you know, a sum of money they use just to test new stuff. And I'm always surprised that we never get that same opportunity in fundraising. It would be brilliant if we had a little bit of money that we could put to one side. It's just for that new testing, new stuff, might then go into something that's a regular, reliable source of income. I'm getting, yeah.
Sorry. I think there's been a question about the website that this is on, the Ansoff Matrix.
Okay, it's Business Balls. Businessballs.com. In fact, what I'll do, there'll be a handout coming around. You'll get these slides afterwards. I'll give you welcome, and I'll do a list of useful websites, and I'll put that on it. You'll get that coming over.
Okay, great.
Actually trying to write it down and speak at the same time, which is a bit tricky. So, you know, put all that together and think about new things. Don't get stuck into the same, doing the same things all the same time. And I know actually boards love, particularly around event fundraising, they love, oh, we're going to have the annual gala dinner, instead of looking seriously, but they make that money in a different way. Is it still making as much money as it could be for your organisation? So don't get totally stuck in your regular, do take a little bit of time out for testing, and always try arguing to the board, or get your head of fundraising or your chief exec to argue for the board that you have a little bit of money put aside in your budget for diversification, just for trying out new products, new services, new activities, a new event, trying online giving, whatever. You have the money to do that. This is the opportunity to have the cases for, I just keep going on and on. Some organisations still do this very, very badly. Case support is arguing about, telling the story of the difference that your organisation makes to your beneficiaries. It's about the difference that you make. It's not about how fabulous you are as an organisation. You've got Lord Flip-Flop as the patron, and you were set up in the 18th century. It's about what you're doing now to make a difference to the lives of the people that you work with, or the piece of land that you're trying to save. It's that story. It's really, really good, useful for you as fundraisers. Something I always did. I worked with Sense in London and Sense Scotland for quite a long time, and I used to make sure that I regularly had contact with clients, the families. I used to volunteer on the holiday programme, because that way it got me really close to our beneficiaries. So I was then able to tell stories that were based on real experience. And I think that probably made me more successful as a fundraiser, because I was very connected with the beneficiaries and could tell that story really powerfully. So do think about, setting yourself time to volunteer or work with other organisations. If you're a small organisation, you have the great benefit of being really, really close to your beneficiaries. But sometimes in larger organisations, fundraising team can be located somewhere differently, can get a little bit distant from the actual service side of the organisation. So always try and keep the connection, and that gives you a much, much stronger case of support, an opportunity to explain your service, the difference that you're making. Then you have to pull all this together into actually writing down the plan. So you have your external, you have your SWOT, you've set your aims, objectives and actions. Now you need to put it all down somewhere. In the old days, it used to be big charts with flip chart paper and Gantt charts. All of those still exist. You've got Microsoft Project, various online options, but put a plan together of what needs to be done, what has to be done before something else can happen, and what are the critical dates. So what are the deadlines by which a trust application has got to be in by? Therefore, you've got to allow 3 or 4 weeks back from that for making sure you've got the application ready. I would always strongly advise you not to leave everything to the last minute. I think I mentioned this morning, I teach that and I preach that, but I don't do that myself at all. It's he who's got something that's got to be submitted in London by 5 o'clock this afternoon and isn't complete yet. So you should have a plan. You should make sure that you've got everything there. Also, because if you go sick with coronavirus, even the Prime Minister can get that impact. There should be somebody else that can able to see what's got to happen and when, and so that they can pick up and run with that moving forward. Now having a look at, evaluating, how are you going to show that you're actually getting to that objectives? I think the downside of somewhere as fundraisers is quite often measured on the amount of money that we raise, as opposed to the difference that we're making and how we're engaging with the plan, where we're getting to on the plan. Measures should always be realistic. I think the board constantly saying that the first thing that they ask about fundraising is how much money have you raised. It should be about what are the connections, what's happening in the longer term. Certainly when I was working with Scent, one of the largest grants I ever got took 3 years to raise. But that was because I knew the trust was likely to support a particular project that we were developing in 3 years' time. And I started talking to that funder 3 years before we needed money. And actually they then fully funded, they gave us 100% of the money for that project. But in those intervening 3 years, chief exec was saying to me, well, you asked them for £10,000, we asked them for 100. And I said, no, let's wait, let's ask them for the big one. And that whole relationship developed, evolved, and still continues to this day. If we always have financial targets all the time, it can be tricky to measure. So try and get that move away, make sure you move away from financial targets always, and look at those other measures that you can put in place. And I think it's over to you, Pam, for how to deal with success.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sue. So the last kind of 5 minutes before questions, we just wanted to say congratulations, you've been successful, you've got your funding through, and just making sure you understand what happens next. I know you're all in that process at the minute. If your application is successful, first of all, make sure you celebrate. And then have a couple breaths through, and then read about the terms and conditions before you sign them, and then try to build a relationship. And those of you who came to the webinar this morning, we talked about building the relationship and how important that's to do with your funders that you're currently working with, but also those new funders. You need to make sure that you're submitting your reports and doing them in advance if you can. Sue gave that example about waiting till 4:59 to file those reports through, but they'll get there. But don't wait. Don't wait to the end. And also, don't wait for funders to hassle you for the reports. Be well prepared and organised, and keep funders informed of what's happening. Let them know everything that you're up to. And anything that they might be interested in. I know there was some talk in between the webinars we were doing today about keeping funders updated about what you're doing. As far as if an event couldn't go ahead, contact your funder and let them know that you're not able to do the event and what you're doing instead. There's a group, we like to get together as fundraisers, but so do the funders. And there's a Scottish Funders Forum. I believe they met yesterday, Sue.
Yeah.
And it's a gathering of funders across Scotland, and includes people like the government who are committed to best practice. And then there's also a variety of funders, Cora Foundation, BBC Children in Need, Comic Relief, Postcode, Roberts. All of these funders, they meet up together and they share information. And they identify and addressing areas of common interest, and they share best practice. And the forum is really has noticed that quite a lot of organisations struggle with things like collecting, analysing, and reporting back for their projects. And they're certainly looking at projects and policies to make reporting more effective and less burdensome. So that's what this last little section is about. The forum convened a working group of people from different funders and voluntary organisations, and they were supported and facilitated by the Evaluation Support Scotland. And I know we just off as a coincidence, Sue and I were talking about the meeting yesterday, and I know there was some concern from organisations about being able to evaluate and being able to monitor what they're doing when they haven't got anything to evaluate and monitor. So please do stay in contact with your funders.
Probably off the record, one of the comments at the meeting of the Scottish Funders Forum the other day was, at the moment we see our responsibility as getting the money out the door, we'll worry about evaluating it later. So funders are with us on this journey with the impact of coronavirus. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks, Sue. And I mean, I think that's it, you'll know that if you pick up the phone and speak to them. So for sure, do that. Think about how your organisation will monitor and evaluate the service you provide. On Wednesday's webinar that we had, we talked about this application process and how important it was to put your monitoring and evaluation in before you put the application in, so you know what you're going to do. You'll have your applications already set when you apply for your grant. So when you start to deliver the project, you need to make sure that there's that system that's there in place to capture that information that you need to report on. So that's really valid. And when you're doing, Sue, if you go to the next slide. Thank you. And information comes from lots of different forms, and it may include things like spreadsheets or videos or reports. Even if one person has their main responsibility, it's good to involve others in analysing the information. And this includes service users or volunteers. So it's really good to get other people involved. When I was working for Ocean Youth Trust, often the people who were taking part in the sailing, there were volunteers. And we had asked them to give their feedback on what they saw the difference in the young people that they were sailing with. But that also got us some really relevant and interesting information. So if you're getting other people involved, like volunteers, that not only increases the ownership of the evaluation process, so it's not only down to you, but it helps people understand how you're going to use the information that you provide. So it's not just that we're asking the questions to annoy them, it's just another piece of paperwork that we need for funders. It's about gathering information and understanding why you need to collect in the first place. It also gives you some great different perspectives. So if you talk to a volunteer and get volunteers' feedback, that's going to be very different from staff feedback. So it's worth collecting that. And it increases an understanding of what information needs to be collected. When you start to analyze the information, you don't just need to read and look at it. You need to critically review what it is that you're wanting to do. So to do this, you need to be clear about what you're looking for. Making sure when you're collecting the information that you deliver your outcomes and that which activities or processes were most effective or most important, and whether the things that worked in the way that you expected. It's all about, when you're analysing information, making sure that you look out for things like gaps. So if that happens, you need to ask yourself why that is. Is it you're correcting you've set the wrong outcome? Or do you need to do more work to achieve that outcome? And you might also find that you've unexpectedly collected information that you didn't mean to, or that you've got an unexpected outcome. You're probably achieving the outcome if you haven't collected any information about it. So I'm Sisu. We're all brilliant. I want to make sure we've got enough time for questions. So I'm going to zip through this because most of you probably know it anyway. Make sure when you're writing a good report that you tell the story, that it's well structured and it makes a clear link, that you're using numbers really clearly. Don't just put numbers in for numbers' sake, that you understand that you're using them, that you provide qualitative information, and that you're clear about what you know. It's also really good to show the individual's experiences, and you need to make sure you're honest. Set out your learning and your failures, because people want to know what happened that didn't go right, and what went well, and then make sure you do send it before the deadline. I've just rushed through those, they're all listed there. Oh, and also in your report, people might ask you things like giving information on a broader context. You might need to give some supporting evidence, like newspaper clippings, or some funders may use video, photos, or even pie charts, things like that. But finally, it's making sure that there aren't any surprises in your report. If things are going wrong, don't wait until the end of the report to tell the funder about the programme. The funder is likely to be more supportive if you tell them about variations, challenges, or changes. So zip through that last bit about good reports. I'm sure you're all writing fantastic reports. Malcolm will be able to tell us all about your wonderful reports that you're getting from everybody. But I think it's probably worth just seeing if there's any questions. I saw a few things pop up. So Malcolm, over to you for some questions.
Yeah, well, thank you, Pam and Sue. Can everyone hear me, hopefully?
Yeah.
At least Pam and Sue, you'll be able to tell me if you can hear me anyway, you know?
Yeah, you can.
I wasn't sure if I'd unmuted myself at that point, you know? So yeah, thanks everybody, you know, lots of questions coming in, you know? So, you know, they've come in at different times. Darren asked one earlier, Pam, I think it was you when you were talking about aims and objectives, and you gave those couple of great examples about, in terms of, I suppose, how much money you would raise from A, trusts, and B, you know, individual donors, and, you know, how you might break that down. So Darren's asking, would you divide it between restricted and unrestricted income?
Yeah, oh, this is interesting because Sue and I had
we talked about this earlier.
something I prepared her. We did actually, yes. Yeah, so that's it, and a good question, Darren. Thanks for that, because it is about that restricted and unrestricted funding. Yeah, so we had that one in, didn't we?
Yeah. I think, you know, I said earlier, we had a really, really good organisation, Pam and I knew well, that were just fantastic about raising restricted income from grant-making trusts, but they had no unrestricted income. And when their auditor got involved, looked at their redundancy liability, they were technically insolvent and had to close. It's always, you know, in terms of grant-making trusts and foundations, it's easier, dare I say it, to get restricted funding. What you need to do is make sure that you have a balance of either unrestricted income coming from other trusts and foundations, or that you're generating unrestricted income from other sources.
Absolutely.
Sorry, back to me, yeah?
Yeah.
Rachel's asking, you know, where you've got, you know, if applications are done, you know, where you're doing it in partnership with one or more than one organisation, whether you've got any good examples.
Sorry,
Pam, is that something you've done?
Sorry, so I'm just saying, I'm just looking at the, sorry.
So if it's where you've got, you know, if you're doing a collaborative funding bid, yeah, in partnership with other organisations, just whether you good examples.
I'm in, you mean reporting or in?
I think it's in relation to applications, you know, if you're applying to a fund, you know, I think that's what, we can always come back to that anyway afterwards, can always pick that up with Rachel, yeah?
Oh, sorry, I found it now. Collaboration on applications. Oh, I know. Sorry, Rachel. Sorry, I was just thinking you were talking about reporting. Collaborations is always a tricky one. I know, I mean, more and more funders are looking at doing it. I mean, I think what is really important is you have an agreement in place with whoever you're collaborating with. That is deciding who's going to be doing what within the delivery, and that they're sticking to that, and you can, you know, have a delivery agreement. And I know it's a tricky one. We did one with 3 organisations when I was working at CVS. And it's about trying to get the budget that all works together. So it is a real challenge working as collaboratively, but if you can do it, it's a real benefit. So I'm sorry, that's a bit woolly. I'm not sure. Sorry.
So another question that Philip's kindly asking us. Evidencing impact's always seen as a crucial point. Often our work's about progressing individual lives. Although we can have case studies, do funders have any kind of common view of assessment tools for personal progression?
Personally, I'd be going to Evaluation Support Scotland website. They've got a whole load of free resources on there. Their training is quite good about turning. They've got a really good tool called Weaver's Triangle, which is about turning, instead of things that you can count, but turning those softer indicators into harder indicators. So really good resources on the Evaluation Support Scotland website. And their training can be very good as well. Have a look there.
Yeah, I think that's a, you know, a very good point, that one, Sue, and I know that, you know, I've looked at that a few times myself, and as well we've used Evaluation Support Scotland a few times, you know, as specialist providers on, you know, as part of this, our support and engagement programme. So, you know, definitely worth a look there. So just looking at another couple of questions. Sorry, I don't know, Pam, have you managed to look? I'm trying to scroll.
Yeah, I'm just looking at
Darren was asking a question. Oh, there we are. I've just found it.
about the capacity as a sole fundraiser.
Yeah, we're saying about the process of developing a funding plan. Yeah, so the process for developing a funding plan be better by a consultant or agency, you know?
Yeah, I mean, oh, Darren, you and I could go for ages about the sole fundraiser and the capacity. I know it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you've got to do so many different things as a sole fundraiser, and yeah, I mean, the process could be you know, utilized or helped with a consultant. I guess probably, you know, I don't know how many sole fundraisers you've actually got in Core Foundation, and you know, in this particular today, but it's a challenge that everybody, you know, that's a challenge of being a master of many, Malcolm. So I guess really what I would suggest as far as being a capacity as a sole fundraiser is you know, just trying to do as best you can a strategy out and keep reviewing it and asking your board for the help. We talked earlier about getting boards to help you with some stuff. That's certainly your fundraising. That's certainly one way of doing it. And volunteers are really helpful as well.
I think sometimes it's worth getting somebody external in because they do bring that slightly different perspective, and sometimes you and your board can be too close. What you tend to lose then is the buy-in you would get if it was something that you yourself have generated and contributed to. It feels that you have much more ownership of it. Trying to get that balance right of skills and opportunities and external perspective can bring against what you, or sort of versus what you internally understand. There are organisations that can help. So there's Reach. I don't know how useful they are. There's things like Inspiring Scotland. Got a pro bono scheme where they have a team of consultants who will do work for you for nothing. It might be worth looking at trying to get those skills in that wouldn't necessarily cost the organisation a lot of money, would bring you in some skills and expertise that would perhaps help you.
Yeah, I can't see any other questions. Malcolm, have you that we've missed off?
I mean, I can see there's a Dan had another one where he says it's off topic, but
Darren.
should funders be considering accepting retrospective funding during the crisis, which will allow charities to act quickly without seeking funding in advance? So
I can talk off the record on this one, which is that funders are just adamant about getting money out the door. So I think if you phone funders that you already know quite well, talk to them about what you need, why you need it, what's the evidence, and then talk to them about how you get that money out quickly. Certainly Lottery are looking at getting money out very fast. Foundation Scotland are they are going to be the Scotland distributor of the National Emergencies Trust money. And they're looking at going live within the next couple of days. I think it's going to probably be Monday now. And that will be grants that they're going to make decisions on within a week. It's about getting money out very fast to organisations. There are opportunities. Keep an eye on the SCVO Coronavirus Third Sector Information Hub, because there are new funding coming online, new funds. I would be calling the funders that you already know well and explaining and seeing what they could do. I know that some of them are thinking about reopening. There's lots of talk, and certainly the will of the funders is absolutely to support the sector and make sure that the sector survives this, as well as serving their beneficiaries.
Yeah, I think that's probably all at the moment. I mean, I can see, and apologies, Joe. So I've got a question from Joe Derrick, you know, about strategy of offering more unrestricted income over longer term impact. And, you know, was that, it's tricky on the chat, you know, that there's, to understand it. I mean, I think with all funders on that side of things, from my perspective, are just will try to be more flexible around that. When they're, you know, with a bit more of a move to unrestricted income and also longer term funding. And so I think, again, for me, it goes back a little bit to what Sue was saying about this, you know, say the storytelling and that it's it's all about what difference that you're making, or what difference you're trying to make, and then what difference that you do make. And so that you are achieving what you're set out to do and what you're all about, and you're capturing that information that helps for your own purpose, not necessarily just about what information you can share with a funder.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. Yeah, that's absolutely. I agree with that.
So I think, you know, we've run over a wee bit this afternoon, but that's great. You know, that people have been able to stay on, and great to have a few more, you know, the questions there. So hopefully it's been a good session. And Sue and Pam, did you have anything that you want to say quickly before the end, or?
No, just
We'll follow up with all the information people ask for. So.
Yeah, and good luck with funding applications, everyone.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And have a good weekend.
Thanks, Malcolm.